Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to Cuberviews episode 16. This is your host, Ian Braverman. Today I am joined by Noah Mickel. How are you doing?
How's it going, Ian? Glad that we get this together. I think we met over a year ago in Hartford when I was there for work doing a draft at Games IRL. So it's good to touch base again and talk some Cube.
Yes, absolutely. I've missed having you there for our Cube nights, so I hope that at some point you'll be able to come out again.
Look, I loved working with the folks I worked with out there, so I hope so as well. And in any case, there's lots of local Cube events especially on the East Coast now. So hopefully we'll meet up at one of those soon.
Absolutely, definitely. Yeah, so introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your history with magic, cube design, some of your hobbies, what you do for work.
Yeah, I've been playing Magic since the earliest I can think is Scars Block in picking up a dual deck that was released around that time and having a friend in middle school who taught me how to play and figure stuff out. And then I got a birthday present from my parents to go to the original Innistrad pre-release. So not Shadows over Innistrad, but OG Innistrad. And so I cracked a foil Garrick Relentless out of my first six pre-release packs, and I was hooked. And I've been playing Magic ever since then. And I've had cubes about as long as I've been playing Magic seriously. I think I had my first cube, which is just a pile of garbage cards, maybe around M13, and have had cubes on and off, and then really kind of made most of my Magic life cube in the last 2 or 3 years.
That's awesome. And what are some of your hobbies and what do you do for work?
So I'm an IT project manager in my day job. It's which affords me the opportunity to do a lot of traveling, and so I use that to end up going to a bunch of Magic events on the side as well, which is awesome. And then otherwise, I smoke a lot of cigars, read philosophy, and I'm a whiskey snob. So
Yeah, you're currently in an undisclosed cigar lounge in Wisconsin. So there you go.
yeah, we don't need to. We can disclose it. It's the tasting room out in Monona, Wisconsin. If you're ever out for a Cube event, even if you're not a cigar smoker, it's probably the best bar in Dane County or Wisconsin overall. So highly recommend making the trip out if you are here for CubeCon or another Cube event.
Yes, shout outs to KubeCon, amazing event. And there are others, some great events coming up soon.
Yeah,
This,
just to preview, I am running a Cube event that I will be announcing at the end of this podcast. So
oh, that's so exciting. That's so exciting. I'm definitely ready to hear about it. And yeah, so today we're talking about one of your cube projects, the Esper Cube, which is really fun. I love color restricted cubes. I have a couple of myself, Bant Cube, Rakdos Cube, and I think you had a chance to play my Esper Cube when you were in Hartford. So tell me about this cube.
Bantcube actually has an important inspiration on something in this environment. I hope we'll get into that, but I got a direct piece of technology that I can thank you for. So
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that I gave you some inspiration. And what was the overall inspiration behind the cube? What made you want to build an Esper Cube?
So I have been playing blue, white, and black cards in constructed Magic for as long as I've played in constructed tournaments. My first FNM Magic deck was a Lingering Souls Planeswalker control deck, and this was all the way back in like M13 standard, so it was still Scars Innistrad block. And then I played Esper for another 2 years with Jace Architect of Thought, and the kind of Return to Ravnica standard, casting Obsidats on turn 20 in order to like finally kill your opponent after you've countered or killed other spells. And then I switched into like playing some more mid-range decks. So I played Abzan mid-range, but I've always loved blue cards. I go by at IslandPonder everywhere. And so having a cube that really cements this was kind of obvious after drafting Tyler Pugliase's John Cube at CubeCon in 2013. So after drafting that, I was like, this cube is sweet. But mid-range piles isn't really my speed. I like to combo. I like to play a control game, and I like synergistic aggro decks. And so that's how we ended up with Esper Cube.
That's a great reason to build an Esper Cube. I've always been a long time blue-white gamer playing Jeskai Sahili in Modern in 2019, playing blue-white Wilderness Reclamation in Modern, Soul Herder, my favorite Modern deck of all time. we have the blue-white love. But for me, it's
Oh
usually
yeah.
green that I pair
Yeah,
it with.
yeah, you like to add great cards. Look, I love all the colors of Magic, and in fact, most of my other cube projects tend to like to play with all five colors. But I knew that this was going to be the emphasis for me. But I appreciate green for what it brings to things, including mana fixing, which I certainly wish I had my rampant growth effects in this cube sometime.
Yes, that's something that we'll definitely get into for sure. And yeah, so tell me more about the structure of the Esper Cube. What does it mean to be a color restricted cube?
So it's all vibes. People who immediately look at the list ask me, first off, why is there a Raugrin Triome in this cube? They'll also ask, like, hey, you have a Golos and a Deathrite Shaman. What are we really doing here? We've got a prismatic ending and I can produce other colors. What are we doing? So it's Esper Cube in a few senses. One, like main monocolor sections, you'll only find white, blue, and black cards. Additionally, you can only get plains, islands, and swamps in the basics box. However, there's a bit of a, history of Esper splashing, a fourth color or even all five colors in your kind of classic legacy 4 or 5 color control decks where you'll like splash for an Uro. There's not anything quite there, but we do have, and this is the tech that I got from Cube, the one color off triomes in order to support cards like Prismatic Ending, cards like Leyline Binding, getting able to splash into things like Golos or Deathrite Shaman. So there's not a lot that you can do with those triomes, but they have the benefit of being additional fixing lands that also have a little more texture than just being, a guild gate.
Yeah, definitely. And this cube is cool because it's like a mix of my Bant and Rakdos cube. My Bant cube is green, white, and blue only. You can only get those colors. And I have a little bit like you. I have Golos in there. I have Deathrite Shaman, a little bit of black. And then my Rakdos cube is swamps and mountains. And I kind of built it as the antithesis to my Bant cube. So this cube, the archetypes kind of feel like a mix between my two cubes, which is really cool. And want to tell me a little bit about the archetypes that are supported in this cube? It's fun because ours have a little bit of overlap, my band, the Esper Cube. Like we have top of deck matters, blink, spells matter, and artifacts, but also because you have black, you have different archetypes that mine doesn't include.
Yeah, and the cube is really, and I'm going to quote myself from my Cube Cobra overview, like the emphasis of what I wanted to do with Esper Cube, because frankly, color restriction like still leaves so much room for like making a lot of choices. And in fact, I've seen a couple of folks fork my Esper Cube list and kind of take it in different directions because of some kind of design choices. So the most important thing for me is to feature the iconic Esper cards from Magic's constructed history, especially those that you don't see in today's kind of powered vintage cube. So everyone knows your powerful cards like Balance, Demonic Tutor, all of your cantrips. You'll see some of that stuff in Esper Cube, but I really wanted to highlight some of the stuff that you remember from modern decks, from Pioneer decks, from old standard decks, from old legacy decks that you don't really get to see in current day vintage cube. So things like Elspeth Sun's Champion from the Theros era of, there were some blue white control decks in that era. There was also the Abzan decks that really played like black white control decks with some green cards. Really want to highlight some of those cards. Other highlights, things like Cranial Plating and Bitter Blossom from like the kind of Mirrodin and the Fairies era when Lorwyn and Shadowmoor came out. Like that's really what I'm trying to emphasize here. And so you end up seeing some differing card choices than you might see if like you could build a power maxed Esper Cube, where I've seen folks like start to put Moxen in here and more fast mana and really lean into that. And so, in terms of archetypes, it's really meant to like for it's kind of cards first. It's like what effects do I want to highlight for Magic's history in these 3 colors, and then coming out of that, what kind of archetypes come out of that. So you'll see things like synergistic aggro decks. You'll see particularly around artifacts. You'll see spells matter decks, blink like you mentioned. There's lots of soul hurting. Otherwise, you've got tokens decks. You can draft lands. And this is a contentious issue in our play group, but you can build like a mono black depth stack with things like Golos and Vampire Hexmage. There's a lot of different things that you would see in kind of these classic constructed decks that are now being brought into an environment where they can really shine.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And that's a great segue into talking about the power level of this cube. So it feels like my Bant cube and Esper cube are kind of in pretty similar space. having really strong interaction pieces like Force of Will, tutors like Enlightened Tutor, threats like Triumph of St. Catherine, really strong cards that I would say are even really high picks in Vintage Cube. But then, like you said, you don't include Fast Mana or Vintage Cube insane staples. What would you say are some of like the big power outliers in this cube? Like I saw Hull Breacher. I don't have that one in mind. That card is
Yeah,
crazy.
the card is bananas. Well, and this is like at the end of the day, you have to make a couple of calls, and you know this is a cube designer who's designed 8 or 9 different cubes. Like there's a trade-off between like we talk about flat power bands as being this kind of like a thing to aspire to, but in fact, I think power outliers are something that creates for really fun gameplay, and it's why people want to come back to environments. Like the reason the Moto Vintage Cube is so popular, even though that's not necessarily my cup of tea all the time, is because you get to do really awesome stuff with really powerful effects. And so I'm comfortable leaning into things like Psychic Frog, things like Metamorphosis Fanatic, cards like Triumph of St. Catherine, Urza Lord High Artificer, like these really strong threats, Murktide Regent, especially in Esper because there's so much interaction available. I mean, we're talking about a cube that goes beyond just playing Thoughtseize and Inquisition of Kozilek, and we have Duress and Dread Fugue in the kind of early interaction. There's a ton of counter spells. White has a lot of exile removal. So, even though there's like these very powerful threats, all 3 colors have high pick answers that you can look for in the draft. Additionally, one of the big things folks will notice, they'll see we have a bunch of reanimation spells in the cube, but reanimate is not here. There's some like really intentional choices to like make sure that the high leverage cards don't cost just 1 mana. Things like reanimate don't exist. Additionally, the top end of things like reanimation targets don't exist. So you're reanimating Phyrexian Flesh Gorger or Massacre Worm, not Grizzlebrand or Archon of Cruelty, because it gives there a little more play to your opponent when you put like a massive threat into play. That said, like I said, I'm comfortable with power outliers because that's kind of the point. We're trying to highlight an era of Magic where there were really powerful cards without hitting like the really, really, really high top end.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a great way to do it. Having power outliers that make someone excited to draft a particular strategy when they see, let's say, opposition in a pack, that opens up a whole new deck archetype. Without that card wouldn't exist. And sure, that card is a power outlier. It's
Mm-hmm.
really, really strong. But when you see that card in a pack, you say, wow, I'm going to build an opposition deck with Reanimator. People see an Animate Dead or they see a Entomb, and those cards are really, really insane, but they put you into a whole new strategy.
Yeah, well, and additionally, there's like lots of room for work through stuff and be effective as the opponent playing against these effects. I mean, your opponent plays a turn 2 Phyrexian Flesh Gorger after putting it into their graveyard. There's a ton of different effects in all 3 colors that allow you to combat that strategy. You're not just screwed out of the gate between like lots of disenchant effects as well as exile removal. You don't lose as much as you would if they put Gristlebrand into play and drew 7 cards, put an Archon into play, stuff like that. That said, I have played some really busted reanimator decks because I got all of the targets, but there's certainly more play to it than you would think in looking at the power level of the cards per se.
And Esper Cube, especially, I think, is really interesting for having power outliers or really strong combos. Like, for example, there are some really strong combos in this cube, like Thassa's Oracle Doomsday, Cephalid Illusionist combo, Dark Depths combo, Hull Breacher Wheels. But at the same time, like you said, this cube being Esper, those are like the main colors for stack interaction, hand attack. You can basically deal with any type of card in Esper. You can exile creatures, you can
Mm-hmm.
exile enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers, you can stop combos on the stack. So really, nothing is impossible to deal with in Esper, which I think is really interesting compared to if you had green, like in my Bant Cube. Green has a lot of weaknesses. It can't really deal with creatures well. It doesn't really have any stack interaction at all. Same with red. Red can burn creatures, but once a creature gets to be past 5 toughness, it's pretty hard for red to deal with. And red can't deal with enchantments well. And so I feel like Esper Cube is a really nice balance because Esper can really deal with anything. And so green and red, you don't have to deal with those weaknesses and make strange cube choices for that.
Yeah, it certainly opens yourself up to more power outliers. Additionally, and And the other thing, it lets me put some of these. We were talking about obscene combos, and while this one's been a little outdated, it's a loved archetype in the Madison area. We have both Phyrexian Dreadnought and Milldrifter in the cube for a kind of what we call the shrimp archetype, where you can use cards like Tail's End. And a lot of folks are like, isn't this kind of outdated? You can't really like get away with this. But like again, like the amount of stack interaction you have from both sides of the table make it such that you can invest two cards in a 12-12 and it's a little bit harder to deal with, assuming that, the shrimp player has structured their deck correctly. Additionally, and I think this is a relevant point, Thassa's Oracle is in the cube, but you're not going to see cards like Demonic Consultation or Tainted Pact for lots of reasons. I don't want there to be like two card combos that are particularly easy to throw together in such a way that you instantly win the game. So I'm not looking for something like a Thoracle Tainted Pact combo. But, if you put the pieces together and you mill your whole deck, I think you should get rewarded for attempting a really difficult strategy.
Yeah, like a lot of these combos can definitely be a little bit scary to go for if the opponent potentially has interaction. Like if you Doomsday and they counter the Thassa's Oracle, you're basically dead.
Yeah, we are screwed. But like you also feel like a genius. I remember like that's the other cool moment with playing cubes like this this was like in an earlier draft of the cube. I drafted a Gifts Ungiven Thoracle Inverter of Truth deck with like also Depths combo in it. And so you had like all of these cool just like gifts piles and doomsday piles you could put together. Like that's a feeling I really like, is folks can feel like they put something awesome together at least once every few drafts. It's awesome to like draft a regular kind of artifact aggro deck, but putting together a real Rube Goldberg machine is a fun moment, and it feels very different than like putting together stuff in the vintage cube where fast mana feels like you're given combo deck training wheels, if you will.
Yes. And one question I have for you is one thing that I don't really include in my Bant cube is, I would say, cards that are especially powerful in a Bant environment based off of the way that decks often fit. For example, Teferi Time Raveler I see in your list. Teferi Time Raveler, there's going to be so much instant speed interaction and counter spells. I feel like Teferi especially can turn things off and protect combo really well. Same with like Hull
Mhm.
Breacher, being able to turn off mass card draw, which blue, black, white are really well known for. Tell me about the inclusions of some of these, what I would say, hate cards that are especially powerful being in an Esper Cube in those colors.
Yeah, so part of it is there's an affinity problem here, and that like I just like both of those effects, and they're things I want available to players. Additionally, like we talked about previously, there's a lot of different pieces of interaction, and those cards don't necessarily line up against all of the different decks in the cube. I've seen like players tap out for Teferi on 3 against like a white black artifact aggro or aristocrats deck, and their opponent like shrugged at them and said, untap, play a Scorpek Lord, kill your Teferi, deal 4, go. It really put their opponent on the back foot. And so a lot of those cards are much more interactable. Additionally, Hull Breacher hasn't turned out nearly as oppressive because the wheels are really inefficient in the cube. So if you look at the different options, you have Commit Memory, Echo of Aeons, and Time Spiral. You're not Black Lotusing your Hull Breacher out and then casting a Time Twister. It takes a lot of time for you to like actually get that combo on the board, which is a very different kind of thing than I think people underestimate how like important the fast mana is in Vintage Cube and how it creates non-games, which is why I'm more comfortable including some of those effects in my cube.
Yeah, and I feel like including cards like that really make it a more skill testing environment. Being able to know, oh, my opponent could flash out a Hull Breacher. I should be really careful with when I'm drawing cards, when my opponent's tapped
Mhm.
out.
Yeah, Tashana's Tidebinder is my favorite example of that, where
Yeah.
like there's a kind of like awareness of being in the list, and I think it's also important to mention and shout out to the Madison, Wisconsin group. I think Joe Anderson referred to it as quote the greatest number of enfranchised cubers per capita in anywhere in the country, and I think that's accurate in that a lot of our players are just really comfortable with playing hard games of Magic and have been playing for a really long time. Whereas like you probably don't want to include cards like Hull Breacher when you're playing with a bunch of new players and you're going to result in feel bads, or with more casual players, which I don't mean casual as a bad word. It's just a description of how some people interact with the game. Like, you don't want to create those feel bad moments depending on what your play group enjoys. Whereas it's something that we find really interesting and skill testing in the cold dark north up here.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Depending on your play group, you can build in more skill testing or maybe quote unquote more feels bads if it's what your play group is expecting. If your play group is Pro Tour players or competitive players that are really used to blowouts or really tight plays,
Yeah,
then
and really like the puzzle of like, okay, here's the set of things I'm playing around here. This is what I passed in the draft. This is what I saw go late. They're probably not playing that card. That's stuff that people in Madison really, really enjoy. It's important to like give those warnings as well in your cube pitch when you've got new people in the group, just saying, hey, this is a rough environment. You want to take interaction really highly and you have to be careful about what your opponent's going to play versus more, chill environments where, you're not going to get blown out necessarily.
yeah, I think that there's a lot of similarities between this cube being so heavy blue focused and interaction focused to a prior episode that came out, the mono blue cube. That cube is, I would say, even more highly stack interaction focused, really tight. If you tap out at the wrong time, you just have to assume your opponent is counterspell. So this cube, in very many ways, is very similar to that.
Yeah, and definitely, you have the real top end of interaction from blue here.
One thing that you did mention earlier that I want to talk to you more about is including off-color cards in a three-color or color-restricted cube. In my band cube, like you mentioned, I have the off-color triomes. I think that it's a really cool thing because these triomes still tap for two of the colors. I only include the ones that are at least blue-green, green-white, or white-blue. But then being able to also have access to a little bit of black mana or access to a little bit of red mana, it's really interesting because then I get to include cards that are good on their own, but get an upgrade when you're able to get those colors. Like, for example, Golos is really strong already when you can tutor up your Feel the Dead, were really strong lands. But when you can activate Golos as a bonus, that's really fun. And for also like Deathrite Shaman, great card. It's a mana dork. It's Grave Hate. But if you can activate the black ability, then it can also be a win con and it becomes even more leveled up.
Yeah, or an Esper on the other hand, helping you stabilize if you're in like kind of a black based mid range deck, being able to like exile some creatures, get a bit of a life buffer, block an X1. Like, you've gotten a ton of value out of that card just by adding a Spara's Headquarters to your deck or the other of the triomes that produce green. It's super super high leverage.
Yes, absolutely. And so what are some of your favorite cards that you include in your cube for being off color?
Like I said, there's very few. It's primarily to, take advantage of cards like Leyline Binding, Prismatic Ending, which are, mainstays of the kind of controlled X in Eternal formats. I like Deathrite Shaman and Golos as well. I think at the end of the day, this is something I'm looking into, is adding a little bit more of this splash ability, including designing a bonus module for the cube that kind of not only ramps the power to 11, but also adds additional fixing in the off colors while maintaining the basics restriction to include things like Underworld Breach or other green cards. So that's something I've been floating around with, not a part of my list yet. There's quite a small number of them in the current list. The other important thing to note is that the value over replacement is just like so low. What would I put in the slot where Spara's Headquarters is? Like a tapped Dominaria dual land? Totally, feasible to just add a cycling tap duel that has this like little bit of value.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I definitely consider with my band cube also to have more like actually off color cards, like having Ren and Six, I thought about having Fallen Shinobi. So
Oh, I love the Shinobi. That's a mainstay in this cube as well.
yeah, last night I was doing a vintage cube draft on my game store, Games IRL, Avon, Connecticut, and I had Bant control, but I was also splashing black for additional removal, Leovold, Fallen Shinobi, and the deck went 3-0. So, hey, four color control, that's the best deck in cube if you get all the
Yeah,
counter
it's
spells.
always the best deck in queue. It's certainly my favorite deck to draft. I do feel like, with a brief sidebar, I feel like a bit of a fraud. I played in a cube event yesterday and I didn't put a single island in my deck all day. all the way through top eight.
That's so upsetting. How did you do that? I don't know.
I drafted a Jund control deck, and then I drafted red white aggro, and then I drafted red white aggro.
Oh man. Hey, sometimes you just gotta burn them out.
It was one of those days. I was just like, you know what, we're gonna not hold up mana on my opponent's turn today.
I definitely have a reputation in my player group of always going Bant. So people are like, put the Bant cards in the front of the pack and say, "Hey, we know you're gonna take this. Come on." And
Yeah,
then,
we'll save you some time. With the card ponder specifically, it will get put to the front of the pack and be like, all right, we know you're gonna take this. It's like I do feel like it's a part of Magic that I really enjoy. And with Esper Cube, I really get to experience that. So I think one of the side effects of having Esper Cube is I felt more comfortable drafting non-blue decks and other cubes because I know I can experience that particular part of Magic whenever I'd like.
yes. And let's jump into a little bit more on the fixing in this cube. So in my Rakdos cube, I have pretty high density of fixing, like 14, 15%. In my Bant cube, like 15, 16%. And people have asked me, why do you include such a high percentage of fixing in the cube? If it's only two colors, if everyone's going to be Rakdos, why do you need to have a high amount of lands? I mean, it's only a two-color deck, or even in Bant. Like, why do you need so many lands if people aren't going to be four color, five color? And for me, it's just because I love drafting lands. I love having a really
Yeah,
good fixing.
100%. Yeah, no, you are preaching to the choir. We are huge fans of drafting our lands here in Madison, in no small part, of course, to the influence of Sam Black, who lives in town and is a buddy of mine. I certainly want to note that there's less in Esper Cube than your cubes. I think I'm somewhere between 30 and 40 fixing lands, which comes out to a bit above 10%, which is certainly a far cry from 15 or 16%. I think the biggest thing, the reason for that, I like the choice of needing to prioritize lands and not just get to play all three colors for free. And the first thing you learn as a cube designer is it's more fun when your players can cast their spells than otherwise. It's something I'm conscious of, given that you're going to end up with a lot more nominal playables in terms of casting cost than you would in other cubes.
I also like to include a lot of utility lands or one color lands because one thing that happens a lot is people just end up being Bant in my Bant cube. Like they're green white and I might as well splash a blue card. I got a really good blue card and kind of like a lot of value piles. So for example, in my Rakdos cube, having Valakut, Cabal Coffers, cards that basically say you're going mono black or you're going mono red, just to add some additional diversity to the draft.
I love that. And similarly, there's a lot of like high leverage, utility lands. I think my two favorites, to give specific shout outs, Hall of Heliod's Generosity is a really, really, really great card if you feel like recurring the card Standstill or the card Shark Typhoon.
Yes, the Shark Typhoon.
We want to make the Flying Sharks. And then my other favorite land, which a lot of people overlook, is the Mycosynth Gardens. I'm sure a card you know really well.
That card's great.
As someone who likes to put a 12/12 into play and have it do something, the Mycosynth Gardens is quite good.
Copy the Dreadnought.
Yeah, you can copy the Dreadnought. I can thank Ryan Sachs in his build around cube. He had that as an interaction, and I took inspiration there. Additionally, just as a land in the artifact aggro deck, just being able to copy a high leverage, artifact that you have in play in the mid or late game is super, super high value. So definitely a fan of including some of those utility lands. I think Castle Ardenvale is also one that is continually underrated by players and I think is extremely strong, especially in those kind of permission decks, those like old school hold up mana, never tap out on your own turn style deck.
Yeah. One issue that I've definitely faced with my Bant Cube, especially, like I mentioned, is people always going three colors and then just kind of a lot of soupy decks. What have you done to try to lower the presence of that? Try and say, hey, I want to push people into mono blue. I want to push people into mono black. What have you done for that?
So I did mention the total density of fixing being lower, and I think that in particular has really helped. You have an additional difficulty in that green is the color that plays well with other colors, getting to splash a lot of stuff. And so there's kind of like a structural difference there where color requirements are kind of more free when you have green in your deck compared to if you're only playing white, blue, and black cards. Additionally, like functionality and making sure that cards in a particular color section are dedicated to a particular archetype for a different portion of the cube, as well as, and I think the biggest thing to watch out for, if you really want your players to play with one particular color, having lots of pips of a particular color is really useful. So one of my favorite white 2 drops in like aggressive decks is Anafen's Kintree Spirit. That's going to cost you white. Same with Flicker Wisp. I've seen some variants of this cube even lean into playing black cards. There's lots of things that I've kept that in mind, but cutting down on fixing and then being conscious of number of pips is kind of the two big ways that I've tried to move this in the direction, and continuing to evaluate like how to reduce the amount of soup in 3-color soup piles that exist in the environment.
Yeah, I've definitely had a lot of issues with the 3 color soup pile. And one thing that I did to try and improve that was really improve the presence of aggro in the cube. When I first built the cube, there was a lot of green, blue, ramp to 10 mana, do nothing decks, or green, white, token, take 100 years to build up decks, or blink decks. And I definitely support those.
Play 3 tap lands on the first 3 turns kind of decks.
Yeah, but I definitely wanted to make sure that players also felt pressure. And me not having red in the cube, usually people just have red white aggro, mono red. So
Mono
I
white.
mono white. So that's exactly what I did. I really wanted to make sure that mono white aggro was really strong. So I put in a lot of white aggro pieces. And some of them ended up being too strong, and I had to cut it back. Mono white was just going 3-0 every time because it also comes to player expectations. People were saying,
Yeah.
it's the man cube. I can do nothing for 100 years and then find some weird win con.
Yeah, the card Mother of Runes gets a lot of hate in our Madison Cube chat. I bias really heavily in terms of making aggro decks super playable, in not just in this environment, but in all of the cubes that I design. Since I have that kind of inherent bias towards playing long game control decks or mid-range decks that can grind out for a really long period of time, picking an identity for aggro, I think, was another big way, because it's not enough to just add the support. You want to make it like charming and interesting to draft the decks in your cube. I think that's a broad kind of a miss from some cube designers, is I put all of these like red 1-drops, or I put all of these white 1-drops in my cube, and my players still won't draft these aggressive decks that are supposed to play on these long-term, long game control decks. I'm like, well, you just put like the best 5 boring red 1-drops in your cube. Like, why don't you like make this more clever? So the way we do it in Esper Cube is aggro comes in 2 primary flavors: artifact aggro and aristocrats, and they're both based in black white. And so there's cards that play to each of those individual strategies, and then just strong aggressive white cards can go in either version of that deck. And so you're going to play a Stoneforge Mystic, whether you're in an aristocrats deck that just has a lion sash or has another piece of equipment, and you're going to play that in your artifact aggro deck. And then you have more specific cards, things like Sir Ginger, cards like Marionette Apprentice, cards like the Lion Sash in and of itself, where you really only play those in one version of the aggro deck or the other, where a lot of the cards still have that flexibility depending on whether you want to play, a aristocracy kind of aggressive deck or, artifact flavored version.
I totally agree with you. Making white or red aggro interesting is a great way to do it. Like, I also include a 1/1 counter deck that's all about making your creatures huge really fast with things like Ozolith or Hardened Scales.
Yeah, well, and more than ever, that deck is viable. I remember people trying to make the +1/+1 counter aggro deck 4 or 5 years ago, and they were really scraping the bottom of the barrel. Now you just get cards like Paw Patch Recruit, which are just houses in aggressive green-based decks. So
And then you get
it's not.
insane payoffs like Agatha's Soul Cauldron.
Oh God, that card supports like 3 different macro archetypes. And in any case, I think we live in a time where aggro can be really interesting in your cube, and it doesn't have to be boring, and you can like make it compelling for your drafters who don't just want to draft a regular mono white or mono red aggro deck.
Yeah. And so one thing that's really interesting is player expectations. In my cube group, I don't know how you do it in yours. We have basically at the beginning of every draft, we do like a vote. What cube do people want to play? And people definitely have their biases. So for the man cube, players who love control, blink, value, really like it. But then there are the players who just want to play mono red, who just want to go all in aggro. And so my cube doesn't really say that. People hear the pitch and they think, oh, I can't even go mono red. So definitely supporting aggro and making sure that you have a wide variety of strategies in there, not just value piles, I think is really important to get people on board.
Yeah, and I think that there's couple of competing tensions here. We're getting into not just specifics about the Esper Cube, but broader philosophy here. Every designer has kind of two tensions with every project that they are embarking on. One is they want their cube to be like interesting and accessible to all of the drafters in their playgroup, and they want to want to bring everyone in and have a good time. But on the other hand, it's a good thing that environments are different and may not have something for everybody. So, for example, I am not a huge fan of single color restricted environments. So things like a mono cube or a mono red cube aren't my cup of tea because I like that color is a constraint on how much you can draft. Now, having a normal cube where you have all five colors and that's a major constraint, and then there's, monocolor cubes where that doesn't exist at all, and then different variations. And I am happy for other people to enjoy something. I think that's a really important thing. And it's okay to say, like, hey, this cube isn't for everybody. Madison has a bunch of like 3-color desert cubes. We have like a Jeskai desert cube and a Temur desert cube. And this is a thing that like a lot of folks enjoy. And then some members of our playgroup are just like, hey, if that's what we're drafting this week, I just don't think I'm in for this. That's an okay outcome as long as that person isn't consistently excluded from engaging in those experiences. And so I think as in general, we should aim to like have something for more people, but it's also okay for a design to have a vision and for not everyone to be on board with that and want to draft that. One of my favorite phrases is taken from a screenwriter in describing things that he doesn't like. He says, that's for other people to enjoy. It is a truly bad state of affairs if you don't want other people to enjoy something just because you don't like it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so what are some of your favorite and most exciting cards from recent sets that you're considering adding or you've already added that have really been fun for this cube for you?
I think I gotta give the shout out to Brain Surge, just on account of me really enjoying the shuffle mechanics and casting, cards like Brainstorm, as well as I really enjoy playing with Mockingbird. I think that card is, really, really, really messed up. Kits has been very good as well from Bloomburrow. I am less judicious than other designers in making sure I keep up with every set release. And so for this particular, I've gotten some stuff from Bloomburrow. I don't even know if I have any Duskborn cards in here yet. I tend to do a review probably once a quarter or 3 times a year to just really go through all the cards that were released, like spend a whole day just reviewing the card file and seeing if there's anything I missed, and also do a lot of crowdsourcing with the group of players in Madison to get a sense of, hey, like what sounds interesting from the last few sets. For better or for worse, I stay busy and there's only so much upkeep I can do. Those are the cards that I would say highlight and why you might see less new cards than you would expect.
Yeah, I totally agree with my cubes also. I have so many cubes. I think I have 9 that some will be on the back burner at times. When I'm most interested in some of my cubes, they'll be on the forefront. Like lately, it's been my Trinket cube, my newest cube, or my multiplayer treasure cube, or my Rakdos cube, because those are my newest projects. And then some of my older ones, like my Peasant cube, my Popper Commander cube. eh, Every so often when I get new cards, I see one of somebody's trade binder and I see a card that seems really fun, I'll throw it in. But I agree, you don't need to update your cube every set.
Yeah, and like it's okay to like disengage and take a break. Man, I can't imagine how you do it. 9 cubes is just I've already internally capped myself off at 4 full-size environments and I only have 2 right now. And so 9 is just crazy. I'm glad that you have the breadth. You have a lot of experiences that you want to be able to provide. So
Yeah. And that's the other thing about having 9 cubes. They get drafted once every 6 months or every year because so many people in my playgroup have other cubes too. So I don't have a huge rush to update them.
100%.
And tell me about some of your favorite decks that you've seen drafted in this cube or decks that you've drafted.
Okay, so I think my favorite deck I've ever seen drafted in this cube was someone drafted Reanimator, Thassa's Oracle, Doomsday Depths in an early iteration of this cube, and it's still totally buildable in the current version. It is a messed up kind of pile. I've seen some Approach of the Second Sun decks that bring me great joy that are kind of designed to cast that card twice quickly, in particular by drawing out the game and then using Approach plus Dig Through Time to get cards. And then I've seen a lot of like wheel decks that I've really enjoyed seeing play. Interestingly enough, I think that the breadth of like kind of shoot the moon things you can do here is a little more contained since we aren't playing with fast mana and lots of truly broken stuff. I think those are some of my favorites. One special shout out to a member of my play group who drafts aristocrats in every draft, regardless of what signals he's receiving. He drafted a white black artifact aristocrats deck with Commissar Severina Rain as like the one 3 drop he had in his deck. He just drafted all ones and twos and then curved out at 3 with that Warhammer
What
40K
card is that?
card.
I don't even know what you
Oh,
said. That was like,
okay.
whoa.
I'm not exactly a big Universes Beyond fan, but the gameplay of this card is so obscene that I had to include it. So it's one a white and a black for a 2/2 legend human soldier that says whenever this creature attacks, each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. So it's like 3 mana Hellrider. And then it also has 2 sacrifice another creature, you gain 2 life and draw a card. So you can get into spots where like you play it on 3, untap, land, like remove a blocker, attack, and then whatever they end up blocking, you just sack that creature and gain life. It's really 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 quite the card. I think it's highly underestimated, and I don't see it in a lot of other lists. If you can handle the having a Warhammer card in your environment, I think it's a highly underrated effect. It's very 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 strong.
Now that you describe what the card does, I do remember it. I played it in one Legacy Cube and it was really strong. I agree. Warhammer, Fallout, Doctor Who. I don't know anything about Warhammer.
I'm not a Warhammer person. My wife is a huge Warhammer fan, but I am not. However, on the other side, I think that there's additionally this tension between like if it can make the gameplay experience better, or the is it worth kind of being like thematically like constrained to just what WotC's been printing in universe? And that's a question that we as cube designers are going to have to deal with for like years to come with how many more universes beyond sets. Like I don't know how I'm going to feel about putting Spider-Man in my cubes, but
Yeah.
it's something that we're going to have to grapple with as individual designers and within our communities. It's like there's not a right or wrong answer. It's what's best for you and your group.
Yeah, I mean, if they print the big Whopper and it's perfect for my Black White Aristocrats deck, then I'm gonna play the big hamburger. It's gonna be great for my cube.
It's like, look, I don't really think I want to curve like Goblin Guide into 2 more 1 drops into Green Goblin. But on the other hand, I think especially as a novelty, I enjoy once in a while like really out there environments, and I'm sure there's like a sweet like in the future, 5 years from now, the universe is beyond cube. It's not something I'd want to draft. Or even if I had the option, wouldn't want that to be able to exist, but I'm glad that for the people who do want to draft that'll be possible.
Oh,
I
I
do
bet
my
it's
best to
already
be very,
possible.
very, very well could be. And I like to be pluralistic about these things. I think that it's okay for people to enjoy lots of different things.
Yeah, definitely. And let's jump into a pack one, pick one here. I'll read off the pack. We got Savin's Reclamation, which is really cool. White Reanimation, Path to Exile, classic removal, Terminus, really fun. Miracle card, being able to instant speed on your opponent's turn, Wrath with a Brainstorm after putting it on top of the deck. That's so great. Spell Queller, Fairy Dream Thief, which is great 1 drop for black, surveils, draws cards in the graveyard. Castle Ardenvale, which we talked about, white utility land, Flooded Strand, fetch lands. I have a lot of trouble not taking fetch lands, so I have to constrain myself. And then Persist, great black reanimation, Retrofitter Foundry, very high power artifacts card, can also do combos with it. SRAM's Expertise, which is tokens, also casting cards for free. Hostage Taker, famously known for having the misprint that it can target itself. But I think they actually just printed a version that can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the Oracle text says you're not allowed to do that anymore. In any case, very sweet.
And then we have Razorgrass Ambush, which is white uncommon MDFC that can bolt yourself to have it untapped, deal 3 to attacking or blocking creature. Tameo, Inquisitive Student, the 1 drop Tameo that flips into the Planeswalker, really strong card. Inverter of Truth, really funny card that somehow took over Pioneer for many years and was a broken deck. And then Supreme Verdict, which is just classic board wipe. What do you think about this pack?
Well, the first question is like, did the shuffler give us the best pack in the cube? I mean,
Yeah,
this is
this is a
insane.
high power pack.
This is an extremely powerful pack. There's really only four cards that immediately jump out at me, and I'll read them off in order. So, Flooded Strand, I generally take fixing extremely highly,
Take the
regardless of the
fetch.
cube. And so, I first pass Flooded Strand. There's only two cards in terms of power outliers that I consider taking over this, being Retrofitter Foundry, which is a great card in basically every deck you put it in.
If you
You
get
know,
Urza with that card, oh my God, you're going
yeah,
nuts.
you get Urza with that card, but even like playing it in your control deck as like a way to put out chump blockers and eventually close out the game is just nuts. And then Tameo Inquisitive Student is the other card where I've really seen it overperform in this kind of environment. The number of different ways in my cube where you can just draw a single extra card is extremely high. Just within blue, you have Consider Opt, Ponder, Portent, Preordain, Serum Visions, Dress Down, Aether Spellbomb, and that's just stuff that costs 1 and 2 mana, as well as Ledger Shredder, Rona, a bunch of the looting effects, and stuff that also makes clues. So on turn 3 or 4, you can pretty reliably flip Tameo
If you
into the
brainstorm, you can
Planeswalker
do it
side. If you
immediately.
brainstorm, you do it on turn 2. So I think that card is super valuable. Even just after 1 or 2 attacks, you're in a really, really good spot. And it's a must kill threat for your opponent. So they'll need to spend like a 1 or 2 mana removal spell that they could have traded up on mana later on. The only other card that I would take for either fun or for preference reasons is Inverter of Truth. If I'm in the mood where I want to draft an aggressive deck or a combo deck, something that's really, really proactive, and I want to go in a bit of a weird direction, I would at least consider Inverter of Truth. Listeners might be a little confused as to why I excluded Persist in the list of 5 cards. I think the reason for that is the word non-legendary ends up mattering quite a bit in this environment where you can reanimate something like a Grave Titan or a Massacre Worm or a Phyrexian Flesh Gorger with that card. But things like Elish Norn aren't, reanimatable. And so while it's a very powerful card and I wouldn't fault anyone in taking it, I think given how I want to draft those decks, that's a reanimation spell I want to get, kind of closer to pick 4, pick 5 as a sign of like, this is my third or fourth reanimation spell that I'm picking up after I move into that deck, especially given that it only reanimates your own cards.
Yeah, Persist is really strong, but I would put it in like the B tier of reanimation. Like you have Animate Dead in here, Dance the Dead, which are just
Yeah, yeah.
high
If
power.
it, Persist were animate dead, like I might draft that over even the fetch land. But yeah, I think I'm on Flooded Strand at the end of the day in this pack, but might draft Tameo or Foundry depending on my mood.
I'm in a very similar position here. Retrofitter Foundry, I think, is probably even better in this cube than in a lot of other cubes because, like you said, it makes jumpers for aggro decks. But then in control mirrors, this card is ridiculous. You just have your counterspell, you pass, the opponent knows you have counterspell up, and then they don't do anything, and then you make 2 Cerbos, and then you just play that game for the next 20 minutes, and how do you lose? So Retrofitter is really strong. Like you said, Tameo is crazy. I think I'm on Tameo. I want to take Flooded Strand because every fetch land I see I want to take, but I had Tameo last night in my Vintage Cube deck, and it was really
The card
overperforming.
is card is just obscene. I do want to give one special shout out to a card I would not pick one, but I think people underrate because I see it wheel sometimes, especially with folks unfamiliar with the environment. Savine's Reclamation is a broken magic card. um, that is a extremely, extremely powerful effect. The fact that it says permanent, meaning it can ramp you, it can return artifacts or enchantments that were removed.
Bring back
Um,
Little Teferi.
Bring back Little Teferi if you want to get real spicy. I've seen that card be insane, even in aggressive decks. Once you get into like that, your opponent's at like 7, 8, 9 life after some early aggression, but they've kind of stalled you out because they've killed a couple of your creatures. You can just get back your best 3-drop and get back in the game really quickly. So I would especially highlight that card. Probably not pick one here, but a card I think players likely underrate in the environment.
And then you can flash it back. You get it twice, and it becomes
Yeah,
even
you get it
better.
twice. Oh yeah, it's a nuts card.
Sweet. Well, that was a really high power pack one pick one. I think gave a pretty good view into the cube. And yeah, so Noah, it's been awesome having you on the episode. I love talking about anything blue white X. So this was great.
Mhm. Yeah, it
And
was awesome talking with you.
Yeah, but anything you want to say before you want to wrap up? I know you said you had something I think you wanted to talk about here, announce.
Yeah. So first, if anyone would like to talk to me about cube cigars, cocktails, or my other magic love, which is old school magic. So I'm a huge promoter of both the pre-modern and old school formats. And so if you'd like to talk to me about playing with the old cards, I would love to, join in conversation. And we have meetups here in the Wisconsin area frequently. So you can contact me at Island Ponder on Twitter, or I'm on Blue Sky more these days. So that's at islandponder.bsky.social on Blue Sky. I'm also on Discord at Island Ponder. You can find me in the KubeCon Discord, the Cube Talk Discord, or any number of other, area specific Discords. Just shoot me a DM. Happy to talk to anyone. Just a exciting announcement. Starting last year, I hosted a weekend long Cube house party called Cube Dungeon Con. That's going to be returning this year sometime in July, thinking the second or third weekend. So look out for an announcement. There are only 24 seats, and we have people fly in from around the country to attend. And so if that's something, you should follow me on Twitter and look out for that announcement. It's always a really good time, and we'll have a weekend of cubing and drinking and talking about Cube, which almost is more fun than cubing.
I love it. I love it. I love these Cube events. Of course, CubeCon. I'm also going to, this episode will be coming out a few weeks after, but I'm going to Vertex in Philadelphia next week. I'm
Very,
going
very cool.
to Cube for a Cause in February and
That's
in
the that's the
Brooklyn.
that's Scott's in New York, right? Very,
So
very cool.
I want to get to as many Cube events as I can. So
You going to Boston Cube Party?
yes, I also hopefully plan
Oh,
to go to
awesome.
that too.
That's also important. If you'd like to meet me in person, I will be at MagicCon Chicago, Firing Cube, be at Boston Cube Party. I will be Firing Cube also at Pre-Modern LobsterCon in Boston in May. So, tall bearded guy talking about Cube. There's like a 20% chance it's me. Y'all can read name tags. So,
You should just staple a ponder to your forehead.
certainly an option. I've also considered I often wear a jersey that has Island Ponder on the back, and so it's difficult to miss. It's easy to spot me in a crowd. So
Yes. Well, it's been great having you on, and I hope everyone enjoyed today's episode. And we'll see you at next week for some more Cube action. Please like, subscribe, give 5 stars, follow the podcast. I appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great day.
thanks, Ian.